You want to play a game?
Sure.
Okay, let's do it. I know it's your favorite one. It involves Pro Football Focus.
Oh, cool.
Figuring out the grades.
Okay, all right.
We did it earlier in the year.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it back. A little Wednesday pop quiz. Berm has been wanting Thursday pop quizzes on the podcast daily, so I thought maybe you could have one on a Woody Wednesday.
I'll take it. I can't remember how I did on the last one. I think I did okay.
Pretty good.
Yeah, okay.
Well, because I think your grades are better. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. Who, through 5 games, is Ohio State's highest graded defender overall?
Oh, I actually don't know. Is it Lathan Ransom?
It is not.
Give me a position group.
It comes from the defensive line.
Is it Tyleik Williams?
And it's not Tyleik Williams.
Whoa, all right.
Who
I'll stop guessing.
would be. He's number 2.
Okay.
Number 1 is Jack Sawyer.
Oh, how about that? Yeah, Jack's been playing really well. His pressure numbers actually hold up quite well, like comparatively to the rest of the country. I know that the sacks don't necessarily, but I think he's been getting after the quarterback at a pretty good clip. And I do feel like he's a better run defender this year too. And maybe, I don't know, just like recognizing things a little better than perhaps he was previously, or just more keyed in on it. But that makes sense, I think. I'm surprised it's not Tyleik, but I think Jack has played well enough to earn that distinction.
Yeah, I do think it is because he's playing the run at a higher level than he has in previous years. Not that he was ever bad at it, but I think everyone knows he came here to rush the passer and, get after the quarterback. And he hasn't always done that at the level that he would have envisioned or anybody else with his recruiting profile. And I think by comparison to JT Tuimoloau, it's like, well, he's the run stuffer of the defensive ends. But I think that's helped. I'm not sure. It's like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, we're talking both about Jack and JT both. It's like, why is the productivity there? Like, shouldn't they be able to just go dominate Western Michigan, Marshall, Akron? And they were in some ways, and they weren't in others. Like in the box score, they weren't. And the opponents were just not able to really move the ball at them. And then there was the conversation about teams are going to get the ball out fast. They're not going to get sacks. They have to adjust. I mean, Ryan Day is talking now about adjusting their mentality. But like, are teams really going to be able to go out and pick on Ohio State because Jack Sawyer and JT, like, I don't believe that. Like, they're playing better than they are probably getting credit for.
Yeah, I think that's true. The sack production conversation is always a little nuanced. Like, I know people get really fired up about it, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I just try to like watch the game and see whether or not I'm sort of feeling their presence out there. And I do think sort of at the height of at least the early season criticism in the Marshall game, I don't know that I felt that. So I thought that was somewhat warranted, but I think it's been much better since then. I want to go back and watch a little bit of the Iowa game because Iowa's right tackle, at least Jennings Dunker, he's pretty good. So I want to see how those matchups went. And they're facing two NFL tackles this week against Oregon. AJ Cornelius, the transfer from Rhode Island, who Ohio State was looking at a couple years ago, and Josh Connerly, who Ohio State was recruiting out of high school. Both those guys are very good. Both those guys will play on Sunday. So those will be fun matchups. But it's also, and Oregon has a lot of quick passing, but Dylan Gabriel does hold the ball long, and Oregon has given up already more sacks this year than it did all of last year. Part of the secret sauce last year was that Bo Nix was just catching the snap and rifling the thing out right away, but the sack numbers look good for that offensive line, and now they want to do the same thing on offense, but Dylan Gabriel, I think, is just a tick slower doing it. So I do think there will be opportunities in this game for Jack and JT to really get after it, and if they do, it'll mean a whole lot because of the tackles they're playing against. But I think they both have played well, and I think Jack has more or less carried over from where he was at the end of last year.
Yeah, Jack, again, as we always say, you can use PFF numbers for whatever cause you want, or you can season it with as much salt as you need to. But like the fact that he is over 90, that's a pretty ridiculous.
I didn't know it was that high.
It's a pretty crazy grade, and Tyleik is right there with him. It was less than a point separating the two. And I think that's when I look forward to this matchup with Oregon for Ohio State, or even down the road into a playoff or a Big Ten championship or Penn State, whatever. Like, it's putting Jack Sawyer playing at the level he is next to Tyleik Williams that, like, I don't know what you're supposed to do offensively in that situation. Like, there's almost, you can't double both of them. That scheme doesn't exist. Unless you're going
to put an extra guy out there.
Put out an extra guy, which then what are you going to do? You get unbalanced, and because you're so worried about that, Ty Hamilton and JT Tuimoloau are then going to feast on the other side. So I think that's really key for this game that we're talking about specifically on Saturdays. Like, does Oregon have the personnel on the offensive line to hold up? Early in the year, it looked like maybe not, and they've played better.
I still think it's a question. They have they lost who was like the guy who was maybe the best center in the country last year and had some difficulty replacing him at the start of this year. They have settled on a starting trio in the middle of their offensive line, but I'm not ready to say that group has figured it out yet because they haven't been tested like they're going to be tested against Ohio State. So I know we're talking about Jack Sawyer, but it really does feel like a situation where Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton can go win the game for Ohio State, because I really like those matchups on the inside for the Buckeyes.
Who would you think is Ohio State's highest graded offensive player? Because it's not different than the last time we talked about it. And the PFF grades love this person.
Is it Quinshon Judkins?
It's Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah.
And there's a good reason to love Quinshon Judkins. But would you consider anyone else?
I would consider Emeka Egbuka. I don't know. I'd consider like the whole
the whole offense.
Who wouldn't I consider?
Right.
This probably is a better question. Yeah, I think Emeka is still like the, would you say, the straw that stirs the drink?
Yeah.
So I think that's him. Yeah, Quinshon's been great, and he has been consistently like getting better. I think every game too, as he's gotten more and more comfortable. His physicality sets a real tone for the offense, and he doesn't have the volume of touches, I think, to rank just high cumulatively in some of the rushing production, but I think on average he's been pretty good in terms of stuff like yards after contact and all that kind of stuff. But they do like him. I don't mean to disparage him in any way, but if I were giving out grades and ranking who I think has been the best, I think I'd give it to Emeka.
It's hard. I mean, the numbers are what they are. We can't change them. We don't even know what their formula really is, but it's like, in my mind, and if you and I are just sitting here talking about it, like, well, who's the most valuable player to Ohio State's offense? To me, I think the answer is Emeka. Like, can you adjust the grades accordingly? Like, well, this team also has Travion Henderson. Like, they don't need Quinshon Judkins to be number one in their overall grade ranking, which is another reminder, I suppose, of the embarrassment of riches that this team has for the skill position player. You know, even if we say, well, they can't rotate 6 wide receivers. Well, the 3 that they have are 3 of the best in the country when Carnell Tate returns on Saturday against Oregon. Mm-hmm. And no, they aren't playing James Peoples maybe as much as we thought they would. Well, why would you when you have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield? And I think Will Howard, he really tossed out a little bone on there when I asked him about Emeka on Tuesday and was like, we can put him in the backfield and he can run in between the tackles. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
That sounds like a thing only a person who has seen that before would say.
Anyway, I'm excited for that part of it. And again, it is a tribute to Quinshon Judkins because I think both he and Travion are doing everything you could possibly ask of a running back. And Ryan Day's parlance for that was like they're both 3-down backs because they can protect, they can catch out of the backfield. But yeah, PFF just still is absolutely in love with Quinshon Judkins. And when you're stiff arming people into the dirt and like breaking out of tackles from one of the best linebackers in the country and making it look pretty easy, I think you can understand why that would happen. I think we're past the point of sports writers being infatuated with Ted Lasso that I can now say this without sounding like a dork. There's a line in the first season of that show where they're talking about Roy Kent, and they say like he runs like he's angry at the ground. Yeah, that's how Quinshon Judkins runs. He's also angry at everyone else. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
To also watch the first season of Ted Lasso and then quit. And please stop. I beg you, don't go any further than that. That is this week's stock tip. Yeah, if you've not watched it. All right. So Emeka is right there as well, but he
ran over a linebacker, man. Like he should be whatever the highest possible grade is for a player. He should get it just because of that.
Someday you and I are going to take a tour of PFF, the factory, and figure out what's going on.
I don't want to go to Bangladesh.
Oh, okay. Well, could be fun. Who is Ohio State's highest graded offensive lineman?
Is it Josh Simmons?
It is Josh Simmons.
Yeah. The offensive line grades, and I actually haven't looked at them post-Iowa all that closely, they have felt a little weird to me this year because they all just seem, I think, a little lower than they should be, kind of across the board. But I would also I don't know. Seth McLaughlin's been good.
He's been very good. He is not high enough on this list, in my opinion, which is of a rank amateur observer of college football.
I think you can flip a coin between Seth and Josh Simmons on who's been the best, and I would be satisfied with either answer. So that Josh Simmons is the highest rated, that makes sense to me. And I feel like we saw a bunch of draft stuff about him like last offseason, and now I feel like I'm starting to see more of it come out too. And I guess maybe it's just that Ohio State's playing some better teams, so now people want to be more keyed in on some of those matchups. But he's been really good in pass protection. I think he has improved his physicality in the running game, which I think Ryan Damon has said last week or the week before when he was asked about Josh Simmons. So he is, I think he is, if you were like me saying like, oh, this NFL buzz is kind of interesting, I'm curious to see how he backs it up when the season starts. I think he's backing it up now. So he's played really well.
Yeah, somebody else who occasionally appears on the podcast said that he was going to be a second-round pick. And
I don't recall that. But I'll take your word for it.
It could be right. Yeah. It could be right. I think I've noticed this the last 2 weeks when Josh Simmons just walked into the stadium. And he was back, I think 2 weeks ago after practice on a Wednesday. And remember when Ohio State brought in Vic Cutler and they're like, well, he's pretty raw. But we think maybe if you get him into Ohio State's strength and conditioning program, like that could elevate it. And they said that a little bit for Josh Simmons. They said it a lot for Vic Cutler. It was like a big time projection for development down the road. But the point is, if you look at Josh Simmons walking around before putting on the pads and you think, well, the Woody actually did quite a lot for this guy physically that San Diego State or UCLA could never have done, in my opinion.
It is noticeable. I thought that when did we talk to Josh? Like
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, when he came, which was the first time I think since last year we talked to him,
and he was great.
He was awesome. But my point was like you can see him on the football field and they all look gigantic. But when like he's sitting down in the chair, you're like, yeah, this guy is like physically very different than he was a year ago. It's a credit to him because I think the resources are here. You have to be willing to take advantage of them, I guess. And he has certainly done that. He looks like a pro. He's playing like a pro. Again, Ohio State's tackles against these edges from Oregon, that is a very compelling matchup. There was a lot of conversation on Tuesday about Jordan Birch at Oregon, who's a big old cat playing defensive end. Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer both, I'm sure will get a crack at him. So this doesn't matter. All Ohio State has to do is go win the game. But if you are in any way interested in like NFL projections, this is a game that people will very much be paying attention to for Josh Simmons, I think, in particular.
So these have all been the best grades. And I said I thought that Seth McLaughlin should be higher. And in the pecking order, the reason I say it is because I don't mean this come across as like blatant criticism. I didn't think that Donovan Jackson would be second according to the grades because some of the breakdowns, and I'm thinking about the pressure that came on Will Howard's interception in the first half, the execution on that 4th and 2, the failed quarterback power. I thought that was coming and maybe related to Donovan Jackson. And again, I don't know what PFF is looking at. I don't know what Justin Fry is looking at. I don't know what Chip Kelly's looking at, Ryan Day. These are the ones that truly matter. I'm only saying that I was a little bit surprised because if we're nitpicking, which that's what we always do day in and day out, like I'm just saying he doesn't feel like he's been the second most impactful offensive lineman for Ohio State.
I agree with that. I don't think the Iowa game was his best game of the year. Aside from those two plays, I thought he was pretty good. But I'm a like 1A, 1B with Simmons and McLaughlin, and then I probably would put Donovan behind those two. But in my opinion, just from watching all the games, it appears that the center and the left tackle are playing the best out of anybody, and the whole group is playing really well. So I'm not like concerned much about anything. It'll be interesting to see like Tegra Shabola in a road environment like this one, a little different from what he saw at Michigan State. And I think maybe Josh Fryer has been the worst offensive lineman. Not that I think he's played all that poorly either, but if you are looking for the spot where you're slightly uncertain of how it might go, I think I'd point the right tackle, but they've all been very good. And Donovan's played well since he came back. And I think taking a step with his game too, that much has been noticeable, even if there was a snap or two against Iowa that could have been better.
Is there anything, as you have got into the numbers and started looking ahead to this matchup on Saturday, whether like you're using Sports Info Solutions, you also use PF, you use everything because you are way more of a numbers guru than I am.
I'm really bad at math, actually.
but you love ball.
I do love
and you know ball. Is there anything that you have particularly noticed, good, bad, indifferent, that you think is a relevant metric to track for Saturday?
I've not actually taken too close of a look at it yet. I was looking on Tuesday because there were some questions about how much pressure Oregon generates. And I thought I saw that against Michigan State last Friday night too. And Jordan Burch had a couple of sacks, but Oregon's like 47th in the country, or in power, or in the FBS, I guess I should say, in pressure rate defensively, which is the best that Ohio State has seen so far, but it's not like they're the best. Like Ohio State, I think, is like top 5. So it's a good pass rush that I think has gotten better. And there are some matchups that are definitely worth watching, but I don't know if it's the most overwhelming pass rush Ohio State will see this year. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, I guess, on Ohio State's side of the ball for its offense, if you look at some stuff like yards before contact, it is way better than it was last year.
Isn't it like 3 yards better?
So so I have not I've not quite figured out how to really tabulate it on Sports Info Solutions. So what I really just looked at was how many carries Ohio State has had this year where the running back is not contacted until he's 3 yards down the field, or obviously further than that. And it's like half of their runs. And last year it was like 28% of their runs. So it's a pretty drastic improvement there in that area, which is like, you don't need numbers, I think, to tell you that. You can just watch Ohio State play, especially against Iowa. Like Quinshon Judkins gets a carry and there's no one near him for 7 yards. Like, oh, I guess that was blocked up pretty well. But people have, I don't want to say consistently run the ball in Oregon, but like Boise State definitely did with Ashton Genty, and Oregon State at times moved it pretty well on the ground too. So I think Ohio State will find some rushing success in this game.
Yeah, it's always fun to put it in that different perspective because we're so hyper focused on what Ohio State does and what isn't maybe at the Buckeyes standard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, is the other team good enough to even take advantage of that? Like, we're going to find out, right? Like,
yeah,
is Oregon facing that this week? They're like, hey, we're just not sure if the defensive front's going to get that pressure, if they're going to be able to stop the run. Like, I would hope they are, because I think Ohio State through 5 games has been like, I'm struggling to think of someone who's played better, more consistently with an offensive line, with a rushing attack than what this team has. Mm-hmm. And I don't watch every single game, and you watch way more of it than me, but you know, I'll catch other games as Tennessee and Arkansas, or you know, what was happening with Alabama and their fronts. Like, what do they think? Like, Ohio State definitely is not struggling the same way that I'm talking about like 2 plays for Donovan Jackson. Well, the other 98 were pretty good, or the 98% of them were pretty damn good. So,
yeah,
you know, can those things get them beat? Like, almost probably not.
They're playing good ball, because it's just like I've watched way more college football this year than I have any other year, while also covering Ohio State. So I feel like I have like pretty good comparisons, and there are teams out there, other teams out there that are playing well. I really don't know if there's another team out there that's playing as well on both sides of the ball, nearly in every facet, as Ohio State right now. I think there's some people concerned about the coverage, right, and how soft it's been, and whether or not Oregon can exploit that. I think that's maybe the biggest area that I'm kind of focused on when I think of the matchup. But I don't have any numbers on like off coverage and press coverage, that kind of stuff. I haven't found a place that has that info yet. I'm sure somebody out there does. But clearly Ohio State is playing more off coverage, and clearly Oregon is going to try to get the ball out into the flats quickly and hope it can break a couple of tackles, or at least make Ohio State show that it can tackle on the perimeter. But I don't know. Like, I think Denzel Burke and Davis Nigbenausen are really good tackler. So like, how concerned are you really about that? I don't know.
Well, we'll find out more on Saturday night, as we always do, especially in a talent-equated matchup game like Ohio State and Oregon. I give Bill Landis an A+ for this dive into the numbers on a Wednesday edition of the Podcast Daily. He will be back with way more information for you on Kings of the North. Check the
big game. I think all of Wednesday's episode of Kings of the North is about Ohio State, Oregon.
There you go. So it's almost like a bonus Kings of Columbus. You don't want to miss that. And then, if you still got the energy, we're going to come back in here later on Wednesday night for some snap judgments after we hear from Ryan Day and the rest of the Buckeyes as they get ready. One of their last full physical practices of the week as they get ready for the trip out to the Pacific Northwest. Just a couple hours past Nebraska if you're in an airplane. Thanks for joining us. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. This has been the Podcast Daily. We'll catch you later.